Mafia Profiles, Volume 4. Felix, Skinny Razor, Detullio. Felix John Skinny Razor Detullio was born on August 3, 1907, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to immigrant parents who arrived from Italy in 1901. Felix Detullio's father passed away when he was only 12, which forced his mother, Rose Amodeo Detullio, to work as a medical assistant in order to raise Felix, his older brother William, and his two younger sisters, Alvera and Anna. Detullio worked several odd jobs throughout his early years, such as at a bakery, as well as at a hot dog stand. But his real avenue for making money became loan sharking for the Philadelphia mob. He would receive the nickname Skinny Razor early in his mob career. Some would say it was because he always carried a straight razor hidden in his clothes. Others would say it was because he dressed sharp as a razor and had a slim build as a young man. Both seemed plausible. At the same time he was growing his loan sharking racket on the streets of South Philadelphia, his reputation as a stone-cold killer was also growing. It wouldn't be long before Detullio would be noticed by the rest of Cosa Nostra. Just a few years before Detullio started making a name for himself, Salvatore Sabella, a mobster who was originally part of the Aquila family in New York and was mentored by the well-respected Giuseppe Traina, was sent to Philadelphia in 1919 to organize its underworld. Sabella was born in Castellammare del Golfo as well, and would have many ties to mobsters who were from or could trace their roots back to that area. Once Sabella arrived, he began organizing the Italian criminal underworld into the Philadelphia Cosa Nostra family. During the pacification of Philly by Sabella's mob, they would fight numerous gangs, the strongest of which were led by the Zanchi and Lanzetti brothers. It is alleged that Felix Skinny Razor Detullio cut his teeth during these street wars. As Detullio grew older, his reputation began to cut a wider swath as well. According to Ralph Natali, Detullio, who was at the time around 19 years of age, had a face-to-face encounter with Al Scarface Capone when Capone was at the zenith of his power and notoriety. Capone complimented Detullio on his skills as a loan collector, as well as his skills with the knife and gun. According to Natali, Capone was alleged to have said something to the effect of, "There are certain people, a year from now, that aren't going to be around because of you." Natali recalls Detullio describing a feeling of great pride hearing those words from Capone. Sabella would step down after the assassination of Salvatore Maranzano and designate John Avina as his successor. During Avina's reign as boss, he would enter into an alliance with the Jewish 69th Street mob, who were known as a top gambling organization. The Philadelphia mob would profit from this partnership, helping them to build and strengthen their own gambling rackets, while Detullio grew his loan sharking racket in tandem. Detullio did not have patience for people who didn't want to pay. Real estate broker Joseph Savard learned the hard way when he was beaten with a lead-filled rubber hose for falling behind on loan payments. Meanwhile, Avina and the Philadelphia crime family still had to deal with the rival Lanzetta brothers. The brothers became a local power around 1921 and engaged in bootlegging, narcotics peddling, counterfeiting, and robbery. On August 17, 1936, John Avina would be killed on 718 Washington Avenue in Philadelphia. The murder scene would take place just a few paces from the intersection with East Passyunk Avenue on what would become known as the Bloody Angle. John Fosco and Peter Gallo were both named as suspects, while John Amato, who just happened to be the chauffeur for gang leader Pius Lanzetti, was later named as an accessory to the murder. Police investigators decided that the murder of Avina was the result of a feud between the Avina Mafia and the gang run by the Lanzetti brothers. The groups had been quarreling over Avina's recent intrusions into Lanzetti numbers rackets. Giuseppe Joseph Dovi, also known as Joe Bruno, became the boss following the killing of Avina. There were rumors that Joe Bruno may have been in league with the Lanzettis in order to get rid of Avina, however this is not proven. After killings on both sides, the Philadelphia Cosa Nostra began to get the upper hand when Pius Lanzetti was murdered in 1936. By 1939, Teo Lanzetti was locked away in prison, and Willie Lanzetti had been murdered as well, signaling the Lanzettis' defeat. Lucian and Ignatius fled to Detroit with their mother, thus ending the conflict. During the war with the Lanzettis, Felix Skinny Razor Detullio continued to make a name for himself until 1935, when he was forced to sit out the remainder of the conflict due to being incarcerated on charges related to the numbers racket. He was sentenced from 3 to 5 years. New Philadelphia boss Joe Bruno had good connections with the Chicago outfit and the Five Families of New York, and he expanded operations outside of South Philadelphia to the greater Philadelphia area, including Atlantic City and other parts of South Jersey. Under Giuseppe Joe Bruno Dovi, narcotics, illegal gambling, loan sharking, and extortion activities are what generated the family's income. And through strong partnerships with other families, the Philadelphia crime family reached a new level of power. It was during this time that Detullio would expand his network within Cosa Nostra, as he was often meeting with New York and New Jersey mobsters on the family's behalf. On October 22, 1946, Giuseppe Joe Bruno Dovi died of natural causes at a New York City hospital, and Joseph Ida was appointed by the commission to run the Philadelphia family and its rackets. During this transitional period, Detullio would continue his loan sharking and bookmaking operations as his Mafia star was slowly on the rise. By the time the 1950s rolled around, Felix Skinny Razor Detullio would be promoted to capo of his own crew. He would be headquartered out of Friendly's Lounge on the corner of 8th Street and Washington Avenue in South Philadelphia. Skinny Razor owned and operated Friendly's Lounge with his partner and Philly mob soldier, Alfred Aizzi. It was Aizzi who would hold the liquor license for Friendly's Tavern because of Detullio's lengthy criminal record. Friendly's Tavern, despite its name, was known to be a violent place and the alleged location of many mob murders. It would be in the early 50s when Detullio would take young Nicodemo Scarfo under his wing and mold him into the stone-cold killer the world would come to know decades later. Scarfo, who was an associate at the time, worked for his uncle, Nicholas Nicky Buck Piccolo, and was learning many of the traditional mob rackets such as gambling and running numbers. Once introduced, Detullio took an immediate shine to Scarfo, as Little Nicky, despite his size, was fearless and ambitious. As for Scarfo, he looked up to Detullio, who unlike his legitimate working-class father, was a gangster and a killer, just like the guys in the movies Scarfo used to sneak into as a kid. It would be Skinny Razor that would take young Scarfo on his first hit. A fruit stand owner named the Huckster had a brother that had gotten into trouble with Skinny Razor. Skinny Razor asked for and received permission to kill the Huckster's brother and took the young Scarfo with him. The two walked from Friendly's Lounge to the Huckster's building in a heavy snowstorm. Upon arrival, the door is unlocked and the two men are led inside. At that point, Detullio and Scarfo stabbed the man to death. As if to add insult to injury, the two men then removed the victim's genitals and placed them in the victim's mouth. This was done to send a message that you don't disrespect the Philly mob, especially Skinny Razor Detullio and Little Nicky Scarfo. In 1954, Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo would be proposed for membership into La Cosa Nostra by his uncle Nicholas Nicky Buck Piccolo and his mentor Felix Skinny Razor Detullio, in a ceremony presided over by Philadelphia crime boss Joseph Ida at Sans Souci Lounge in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Scarfo would be placed in the crew of Detullio, where he would continue his mentorship. A few years after the ceremony, Joseph Ida would turn over day-to-day operations to his underboss, Antonio Mr. Miggs Polina. However, there were deep divisions in the family, and the commission would only confirm Polina on an interim basis until the family could unite around one leader. Angelo Bruno Annaloro emerged as Polina's main rival. It is alleged that Polina would order Ignazio Denaro to murder Bruno, clearing the way for his permanent ascension. Denaro would instead inform Bruno of the plot, and Bruno would then inform the commission. The commission determined that Polina abused his power as interim boss by attempting to murder Bruno. The commission would then force Polina to step down and endorsed Angelo Bruno as the new boss in Philadelphia, with Ignazio Nats Denaro as his underboss. Felix Skinny Razor Detullio had the respect of the new boss and underboss from the start. By this time, he was managing interests in Philadelphia out of Friendly's Tavern through the use of different crew members, including future Philadelphia crime boss Ralph Natale. Detullio was spending more time in Atlantic City, which, with Bruno's blessing, he ran with a free hand. He and Alfred Aizzi began operating out of the 500 Club in Atlantic City, which became known as a hangout for mobsters and wise guys. Philadelphia boss Angelo Bruno was known to frequent the establishment, especially when high-profile acts such as Sammy Davis Jr. performed there. After his release from prison on a manslaughter charge, Nicky Scarfo would join his capo in Atlantic City in 1961. In 1962, Angelo Bruno handed down a contract to Felix Detullio on Dominic Reds Caruso. Evidently, Caruso had disrespected family consigliere Giuseppe Joe the Boss Runeta, which in La Cosa Nostra calls for the death penalty. Detullio would then give the contract to his protege Nicodemo Scarfo. It would be Scarfo that would carry out the hit. Scarfo associate and future family underboss Chucky Merlino would be used to set Caruso up by inviting him to a meeting with Scarfo. Caruso and Scarfo would meet, and Scarfo would lull Caruso into a state of relaxation by taking him to a bar in Vineland, New Jersey, owned by a Bruno associate. Bruno mobsters would be the only ones in the bar, including an associate who acted like the bartender. Shortly after their arrival, Scarfo would shoot Caruso multiple times at point-blank range. When Scarfo observed that Caruso was still breathing, he grabbed an ice pick and stabbed Caruso upwards of 15 times, breaking the ice pick off in his spine. However, as part of the contract, Caruso was to be strangled by Bruno's soldier Santo Idoni for mouthing off to Joe the Boss Runeta. Since Idoni showed up late to the restaurant and Caruso was already dead, Scarfo had Idoni strangle the corpse in order to leave marks on the neck in case the body was ever found. At the end of the day, the contract was complete, and the reputation of both Scarfo and his capo Detullio continued to grow. Scarfo also made a lifelong friend in Santo Idoni. When Idoni thanked Scarfo for covering for him, Scarfo replied, "You and I are Calabrese. We need to look out for each other around all these Siggies." Siggies was a slang term Scarfo used to describe Italians of Sicilian descent. The comment also highlighted the rift between the Calabrian and Sicilian factions in the family at that time. By the mid-1960s, Felix Detullio would have introduced his protege, Nicodemo Scarfo, to a number of major players in New York and New Jersey La Cosa Nostra. These connections would prove invaluable to Scarfo. In later years, he would strengthen those ties that Skinny Razor helped forge when Scarfo was incarcerated in Yardsville Penitentiary on contempt charges as a member of the Yardsville Nine. The Yardsville Nine represented a collection of La Cosa Nostra members operating in New Jersey that all ended up doing time together at Yardsville Penitentiary. The press dubbed them the Yardsville Nine, though the actual number of mobsters locked up varied. Most of these mafiosos were also locked up on contempt of court charges, just like Scarfo. Philly mobsters included boss Angelo Bruno, Ralph Blackie Napoli, and Scarfo himself. Also locked up were powerhouses from the Genovese family, such as acting boss Jerry Cattina, Richie the Boot Boiardo, Anthony Little Pussy Russo, Angelo Gyp DiCarlo, and future Mafia power broker Bobby Manna. Sam the Plumber de Cavalcante of the de Cavalcante family, and Bayonne Joe Ziccarelli of the Bonanno crime family were also in Yardsville. Felix John Skinny Razor Detullio would pass away from natural causes in 1966. Nicodemo Scarfo would take over Atlantic City operations. An old friend, Philadelphia mobster Alfred Aizzi, would transfer the Friendly's Lounge liquor license over to Detullio's wife. As of 2017, Friendly's Lounge remains in Detullio family hands. Felix Detullio was known throughout Cosa Nostra as a serious, no-nonsense killer. However, it was his respect and connections that became his legacy when he passed them on to Nicodemo Scarfo. Scarfo used those connections to eventually take over the Philly mob, etching both their names into Cosa Nostra history.